I want to start the second hour of the radio program with the coaching matchup in this one. I'm fascinated by a lot of elements of this game, Swigard, just from a matchup standpoint. And one of them is Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan. Two offensive geniuses.
Yes.
And I asked a question last night on Twitter at Dirt and Sprague, X, whatever you want to call it. Who is the better coach? And this I should have put not legacy, not for their entire career. Andy Reid wins that, no problem. Right now, to you, who is the better coach? Seemingly started out entirely Andy Reid. I'll go check up on the status of this, but it was overwhelmingly Andy Reid. And a couple listeners responded easily Andy Reid, handedly Andy Reid. And I thought that was a very, not that it's the wrong pick, but interesting how quickly it was just all Reid, no Shanahan.
It's hard in this game to I kind of look at the coaching staffs as a whole, because Spagnuolo's going to be such an integral part, what he's done with that Kansas City defense this year.
I mean, he helped shut down a Shanahan offense in 19 in his first year as DC.
Exactly. So I do like Andy Reid in this game. One, he's not that Shanahan's been there before, but he's been there so many times now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at least he seems outwardly, I don't know as much about Shanahan, but he's far more receptive and inclusive to ideas from whoever and whenever up and down the team, to try and take advantage and find, ways to gain an advantage in a game. Kyle's really scripted. They like to have their game plan going. I think Reid's more likely in the course of a game to scrap something and try something different.
Why do you feel that way?
I don't know. I don't know if it's just his own personal nature, but
because one of his reputations, Andy Reid, for a long time, and I think it still sits with him a little bit for people, is that, hey, it's 4th and 4, and unless Patrick absolutely will not get off the field, there's still people that believe Andy Reid will punt. Right? We talked about that going to the Lion game. Who's going to blink on 4th down? And Dan Campbell he's all in on 4th down, right? Why kick a field goal and tie the game? I'm going for it. We're winning the game. Josh Reynolds drops pass. I think some of that, what's interesting to me is when we talked about Shanahan in this run the Niners have had, where they've, 4 out of the last 5, they've been in the NFC title games. They've been to a Super Bowl. They lost to Andy Reid and the Chiefs. I remember saying a few weeks ago, it's very reminiscent of Andy Reid in Philly, where he's good. It's not really a question of how good he is, whether he's 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know where Kyle Shanahan registers for most NFL fans, but he's got a little bit of the Philly Andy Reid stuff. He's good, yet he didn't break through. He got to 1 Super Bowl. Kyle got to 2. And there's a really good read on NFL.com of how they're kind of mirroring each other, except right now Kyle is in his Philly days.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that means Kyle's going to go to another team and, find his quarterback. Mike Sando, I thought, wrote a really good piece of how the Chiefs built their team is sustainable and how the Niners have, stayed here isn't lucky, but it's also not very sustainable. They've swung and missed greatly in the draft, going after Trey Lance, not even really scouting or paying attention to Patrick Mahomes, who was readily available for them in the Solomon Thomas draft, but instead they had to have another defensive lineman. He ended up being a bit of a bust. He's on his 3rd team. You could have got Patrick Mahomes. The only interesting part of this to me, because I think most people pick Andy Reid, Swag, was the responses to, Reid because he won on the road. Reid because in this game I think he's a better coach. And I certainly that can be true, but my response is kind of so if I gave Patrick Mahomes to Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy to Andy Reid, are we having this matchup? Are you picking Andy Reid to beat Kyle Shanahan if he has and look, he could have had Patrick Mahomes. He didn't want him. He didn't scout him the way Kansas City scouted him. But I think sometimes it does boil down to that Andy Reid is all-time great. One of the greatest coaches to ever coach football, Andy Reid is there. I thought he was kind of in that category even before winning a Super Bowl because what he did in Philly was so special. And then he won the Super Bowl, and then he won another Super Bowl, and he might win his third title, and that just cements the legacy. I believe he'd become the 6th coach all time to win 3.
Let's see, Belichick.
You got Knox, Belichick, Walsh, Cowboys, blanking on him. No, you're right. They only won 2 in the 70s. That's right.
Landry had 2. Jimmy had 2.
So maybe it's
Barry had 1.
I saw the stat on NFL.com. It's either 5 or 6, but he'd be joining rarefied air in NFL history. But sometimes it boils down to you got the better quarterback too. That matters in the equation.
Certainly in today's game.
Well, I thought this was an interesting point that this listener Dustin chose Reid because Kansas City went on the road against the 2 seed, went on the road against the 1 seed. And that was an amazing feat. They were an underdog at Baltimore. A lot of people picked against them. They were a slight underdog at Buffalo. I picked against them. They win. But I think some of it, too, is how much is the quarterback dictating these terms versus if you don't have that generational quarterback. One of the great stories in NFL history with the draft is that during the year that Mahomes was coming out, and the Chiefs were kind of way back. I think they traded up 10 spots to get him. So like in the 20th range because they were a playoff team with Alex Smith. One of the great stories is the not the general manager, but the assistant GM, who I believe is now the GM now, every single day, he left a note on Andy Reid's desk every single day. Hey, Mahomes. And it'd be like Mahomes stat line. It'd be Mahomes tape. And eventually Reid came in and saw this and called him and like, hey, man, I get it. You really want this guy. You don't have to do this anymore. I got the message loud and clear. And then Reid scouted him as well. And then Reid, of course, smart, great mind, said that kid has a cannon. Looks like he can do some things. He can improvise the best of them. And they hit a home run. But like even in Andy Reid, sometimes those guys don't even see it. It takes that other voice, that other pair of eyeballs to go, yo, there's this kid. And then Reid's alerted to him and he goes, yeah, you were right.
I think that's one thing when Andy got to Kansas City, I think he's a lot more open to ideas, information, concepts, and ultimately it's his responsibility to figure out how it all comes together into a team and a game plan.
Do you think in Philly he was not the opposite, but a little more stubborn or?
Yeah,
okay. Because I definitely feel that way about Kyle Shanahan. I think
Kyle's, he's obviously was ingrained with his father. And
I told Nimick this. I comp him to like the coaching equivalent of Manning. And I don't mean that to say like, oh, he's a top 3 coach of all time. What I mean, though, is sometimes your genius gets in your way. Sometimes you're so smart that you kind of outthink the moment. And he did that against Green Bay. Well, I can't give him the ball back. Dude, there's 4 minutes left in the half. You might get 2 possessions here. But you coached it so scared of having Jordan Love have the ball that you moved 40 yards in 4 minutes. And then you had your field goal as he blocked the field goal. That's atrocious.
Yeah.
You're outthinking the room. You're thinking too hard here. But what his genius is in offense, what his philosophies are, and how successful they can be because, well, he did it with Jimmy G, and here he is doing it with Mr. Irrelevant. But I think the element you're hitting on it's a very valuable one, and one that I want to see if it plays out in the Super Bowl. Many think it's just going to boil down to, well, it's Mahomes. They got Mahomes. Yeah, but does Reid make a pivotal decision? Is Reid going to be more flexible versus Shanahan? How scripted is it going to? We know it's going to start scripted. Is he just going to abandon the run game? Is he going to stay with the run game even if it doesn't have success? There is an element of Shanahan where sometimes he gets in his own way. And I cannot wait. I mean, I'm nervous wreck about it, but I cannot wait to see if it plays itself out in the Super Bowl. Even the Lion game, bit odd. Their 2 playoff games they've had. I totally understand why people would take Kansas City. Like, what the hell is this? Are you the team that barely beats the 7-seeded Packers at home and needs this great comeback? Or did you just play bad football back-to-back weeks And now you got 2 weeks time, 12 weeks, 12 days, whatever it is, and you figure this out. It's, the quarterbacks are important, obviously, but this is the matchup of matchups. You got two great offensive minds, Andy Reid going for his third one, and Kyle Shanahan looking to exercise those demons in this one and win his first one. So just an interesting matchup in general in a lot of positions. Coaching, I think, kind of takes the cake given everything we've seen with Reid and Shanahan in their career.